Hello guys, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be making a keto cheese stuffed crust pizza. Let's get to it. So to start, I'm going to be using a food scale. I highly recommend using a food scale. I think one time I tried using it without it and it was a disaster. So just measure out 5 ounces of almond flour. The type of almond flour you use doesn't really matter. As long as it's the least amount of carbs possible, that's basically our goal. Next, I'm going to be adding a teaspoon of baking powder. Now, for some flavor in the crust, I really like to add some garlic powder. I just feel like if you can add some seasoning, why not? I don't recommend putting salt, but garlic is always a nice flavor on the crust, and I just kind of sift it around and mix it well like that. The next thing that you're going to want to do is measure out 10 ounces of mozzarella cheese. I'm using a little bit of my leftover blocks of mozzarella cheese from last time as well. Basically, you're just going to want to rip it apart in there into small pieces, and it'll make it easier to melt. Once you've done that, then you're going to put it in the microwave for 30 seconds and start preheating your oven to 400 degrees. For your mozzarella cheese in the microwave, you're going to just want to continue putting it in for 30-second intervals. After a minute, it's going to look like this. And after 30 seconds more, it should look like this. It's going to be very gooey and very easy to handle. Now you're going to want to add 1 egg. You're going to mix it for a couple minutes just to make sure that the egg and cheese are completely combined. It won't be perfect, but you will notice that the cheese is turning into a yellow pale color. For this melted cheese, I do recommend using blocks of cheese just because shredded cheese has a lot of preservatives in it that keep it from clumping, and that adds a lot of unnecessary carbs. So blocks of cheese usually have no carbs or little carbs. Now that it's all mixed, you're going to want to add half of your almond flour mixture. After adding that part of the almond flour mixture, you're going to want to use either a fork or a spatula like this to start combining everything. Now you're going to want to add the second half of your almond flour mixture. Now here you're going to want to combine the eggs, cheese, and flour as much as possible with the tool you're using. After that, you're going to wash your hands and start kneading the dough. It should turn out to be this consistency. There should be very little crumbs left behind, and it should basically just look like regular pizza dough. Now you're going to want to clean off your counter and make sure that it is disinfected. You're going to start by putting a little bit of almond flour onto the counter just so that the dough doesn't stick, because now we're going to start spreading out the dough. Now, there's not really a specific way to do this, but usually I like to first coat both sides of the dough with the light powdering of almond flour, and I add a little bit as needed. Then I just start forming a circle as much as possible with just my hands. But don't worry if it's not perfect. We're going to be rolling out the dough later. This is just to make sure that it's easier to do that later. I also recommend to keep flipping over the dough just to make sure that everything is as even as possible, and it really does help the process go a little bit quicker. After pressing out the dough, you're going to lay a piece of parchment paper over a pizza tray, and then you're going to cut out another piece of parchment paper about the same size, and you're going to start putting that over the dough that you started stretching out. Now, I don't have a rolling pin, but you can use a wine bottle, and that's basically what I've been using, and it works just fine. Make sure that you do this on a flat surface and start rolling from the middle to the outer edge. You're going to want to roll this out as thin as possible, but also make sure that it's even and there's no tears or holes inside the dough. After rolling it out, you're going to take off the top piece of the parchment paper and you're going to start kind of smoothing out the edges a little bit and pressing them down. We're going to make this a stuffed crust pizza, so we're going to want to make sure that those edges are stretched out as much as possible. Now for the crust of the pizza, I'm going to be stuffing it with string cheese. String cheese is a great option just because it's easier to use. The specific string cheese that I'm using has 0 net carbs, which is perfect for a keto diet. Now, depending on how big you are able to stretch out your dough to, you're going to probably use 6 to 8 sticks of cheese. You're going to outline the border of the pizza with these sticks of cheese. You're going to want to leave at least an inch of space between the edge of the dough and the sticks of cheese, just so that you have enough space to roll them. And as you can see, I even took off some parts of the cheese so that I could fit them all. Now the rolling part does get a little bit complicated, but just take your time. As you can see, what I'm doing is not really perfect, but I'm slowly going around and covering the sticks of cheese with the dough. As I go, I try to press the edges down into the dough as much as possible to seal it. I always go back and I press the edges down again, just because I want to make sure that it is as sealed as possible. In the oven, some does come out, but you just want to limit that as much as possible. And it should basically look like this. Now you're going to just want to poke some holes with the fork into the dough. This will allow the dough to cook a little bit more evenly and prevent it from puffing up too much. Now at this point, your oven should be preheated already to 400 degrees, and you're just going to stick that in. And the amount of time that you cook your crust for really depends on your oven. I usually cook it for 6 to 8 minutes, and I just check up on it periodically to poke any bubbles that form. After you take it out, it should look like this. It's going to be a light brown color. Here you're going to start by adding your pizza sauce. The pizza sauce that I use has a little bit less than 3 net carbs per 4th cup of sauce. I don't usually measure it out because I don't use too much, but really how much you use depends on you. I really like this brand of pizza sauce. I think it tastes great. You're just going to spread out the pizza sauce as evenly as possible. How far you take it out to the edge is really up to you. If I wasn't doing a cheese stuffed pizza crust, I'd probably take it out all the way to the edge. But since I'm doing the stuffed crust, I'm just going to put it around here. And after you put the desired amount of pizza sauce that you want, you're going to start putting cheese on top. You can use whatever type of cheese. Here I'm using mozzarella cheese. You can either shred it directly from a block, or if you're lazy like me, you can just take it from a bag of shredded mozzarella cheese. I like to choose a cheese that has the least amount of carbohydrates that I can find, just because it also makes it melt way easier. Then you're going to add whatever toppings you'd like. You can either keep it as a cheese pizza, or if you're like me and I love pepperoni, I am making this into a pepperoni pizza. After putting on your desired toppings, you're going to pop it back into the oven. I like to cook it for about 10 to 12 minutes, really depends on how well done you want it. And usually for this part, I bake it at 420 degrees. Around halfway after it's been cooking, I like to take it out briefly and put some oregano on top. I really feel like it brings out the best flavors in the pizza. And as you can see, it bubbles up and cooks just like regular pizza would. After taking it out, it should look like this. And like I said, you can cook it for as long as you would like, basically until it's as brown as you want it. I like it to this medium golden brown crust, and it cuts pretty easily as well. Also, when I first took it out of the oven, some of the stuffed cheese did escape out of the outer edges of the pizza. I did cut it off to make it more aesthetically pleasing, but you can still tell that there is a lot of cheese in the crust, and the pizza consistency is basically just like regular pizza. I also recommend letting the pizza sit for about 5 minutes before taking a slice. Here I just couldn't resist, just because it looked so good and it tasted just as good. This pizza tastes really good, and I hope you guys really enjoyed the video and enjoyed the recipe. The whole pizza is about 15 net carbs, so it's really like eating a guilt-free pizza. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.